Hello, class, and we're going to get started. So, the lexicon list number 2 is posted on Blackboard. So, I would want you to access that, and perhaps you can print it out if you have that resource, or just be able to look at it online. So, the first term is situational awareness, and the as you can see, the definition of situational awareness is the maintenance of alertness regarding the perceptions of one's surroundings and one's actions under intense or hazardous conditions. And you might wonder, well, why are we concerned about situational awareness? Um, as you probably can imagine and have experienced by this time, it's so important when it comes to being operating an edit system, operating any type of system associated with media creation, particularly when you're under deadline. And as you can imagine, there are going to be, as you pursue your career, there are going to be many times when you are under deadline. We've talked about my experience at ABC News as an editor, and most of my career at ABC News involved me editing under deadline, and most of a good portion of my career at ABC involved operating on nonlinear systems, just like we have there in at Bowie State University. So you can imagine that you're basically dealing with systems such as Microsoft, and you're invariably you're going to get error messages. Your system will crash, and usually of course, it will crash just as you are about to file, just as you're about to complete your last edit, in order to be able to get your package on the air. So that's why it's very important to be able to make sure that you save your material, your work, your timeline on a regular basis. When you set up your edit system, each individual editor can have their own personal settings, and so you can actually program in a duration or a time for every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, for your system to automatically save your work, your files. So that's very important. Again, also from a situational awareness standpoint, you want to be able to look at your other peripheral equipment, other peripheral systems, your audio boards, your whatever ever involved in your editing system, in order to be able to always know what the status of that technology is. From the standpoint of kind of remembering situational awareness when you see it on the exam, just remember that in contrast to being aware of one's surroundings, which we might do, on a regular basis when we're out in the street, out and about. When it comes to situational awareness, the key words in the definition are, one's regarding the perceptions of one's surroundings under intense or hazardous conditions, and that's the key: under intense or hazardous conditions. So the number 2 term is cutaway, and we've talked a lot about cutaways, and that's in the definition, of course, is a cut to a shot of a person or object in order to avoid presenting to the viewer a jump in linear action. As we've talked about before in class, this is one of the most important concepts in video editing. You're going to need to be able to identify jump cuts, and of course, we talked about the fact that anytime that you basically make an edit, particularly in a situation where you have a progression, you have a person on camera, a talking head, and you want to pull up, you want to take some of that continuity out for edit, for your edit purposes. You're going to have a jump cut. Also, we've talked about the fact that what's the most basic transition? A cut. And so when you make an edit, a cut, when you cut material out of a linear progression, in terms of what you've captured video-wise, there will be a jump cut. And of course, the way to get around a jump cut is the utilization of a cutaway. There are going to be times when you're going to want to feature that cutaway. You're going to want to keep that. I'm sorry. You're going to want to feature that jump cut. You're going to want to keep that jump cut in your continuity. If you're doing a music video or something that has a fair amount of energy in it, you might want to maintain or retain the jump cuts for an aesthetic reason. But most news organizations, most established types of media entities, such as a network, that type of operation, they're going to want you to cover the jump cuts. And again, the most important thing to remember is that there are two types of cutaways. There's the internal cutaway, which features the subject of the cutaway in the cutaway, and then there's the external cutaway, which goes away from the subject of the jump cut. When you use an external cutaway, you're going away from the subject of the jump cut, and you're using a shot of the reporters in the audience. You could use a shot of the camera people, that are capturing the particular event. You could use a tight shot of someone's hands, anything that would not feature the person that actually was the subject of the jump cut. Number 3, dialectical. And the next 4 terms, dialectical montage, and juxtaposition, are all related. And for the remainder of the semester, we're going to be talking about these terms in relationship to dialectical montage. Dialectical, logically reasoned through the exchange and or presentation of opposing ideas. And there's a concept that will be on your midterm exam, and so you're going to want to make a note of this, write this down if you've made a copy of the lexicon list, you're going to want to write this down, or you're going to want to basically input this onto your digital platform. And that is that theses, and that's THESIS, and I will post these terms in the discussion section that I will post for this lecture. Theses, again, that's THESIS plus antithesis, and that's NTITHESIS, antithesis. Theses plus antithesis equals synthesis, and of course synthesis is SYNTHEIS. Again, so you're basically taking the theses, which is a separate entity, and of course from the standpoint of when we're considering video continuity, video media, you could say that your thesis could be the video portion of a presentation, and the antithesis could be the audio portion of a media presentation, and the synthesis also which could be considered a new idea, is the outcome of those two entities coming together. It's the outcome of theses joining up with antithesis. And the synthesis is again that new idea, and where does that new idea occur? It occurs in the mind of the viewer, and in essence, that's pretty much what we're talking about when we talk about being media professionals. We're basically trying to move an individual observing, viewing our work, our continuity. And being able to elicit an intellectual response, an emotional response, being able to get them to do something. And if you create the right type of continuity, You can get someone to do anything. You could make them jump out of a window, and that's what advertising is about. It's the coming together of sound and images, audio and video, in order to move somebody. That's why we buy a certain type of soap, we buy a certain type of car, we use a certain type of cosmetic because of what we've seen in advertising. And by the time that you get to be an adult, you've seen literally millions of hours, certainly millions of individual commercials and thousands of hours of advertising. So again, we will be talking a lot about dialectical. The next term is montage, and the definition is an art form consisting of putting together or assembling various smaller pictures to create a larger work. A technique in video editing in which a series of shots are edited into a sequence to condense space, time, and information. You might remember that I had one of your lab assignment number. What was that? Lab assignment number 2 was to do a tone poem to create and that indeed was a montage. And you're going to find out, and when we do the lecture on dialectical montage in a week or so, that that is a very specific type of dialectical montage. When your tone poem, in essence, was again a very specific type of dialectical montage. One of the other, as you can see in the definition, the part of the definition that we're obviously primarily concerned about is a technique in video editing in which a series of shots are edited into a sequence to condense space, time, and information. So along with the idea of theses plus synthesis equals theses plus antithesis equals synthesis. When you're creating a montage, you're trying to move someone intellectually. You're trying to move someone from an emotional standpoint. And also a montage is a way, as it says in the definition, is a way to condense space and time. There are times when we're creating continuity, particularly if you're under time restraints from a standpoint of how long your project can be, how long your timeline can be. For example, a reporter package, and let's say you were covering, the president, and I'll use President Obama as opposed to 45, and so you were assigned to do a reporter package where you are, your President Obama has traveled overseas, and he's on a diplomatic, a foreign mission, a diplomatic trip. And he arrives early in the morning, and then he goes to maybe to the dignitaries of that particular country that he's visiting. He goes to their home or to their official residence, and then there's a photo opportunity, and then he might go visit maybe some industrial complex in this particular country that the people of this particular country are proud of. And then they might have a joint press conference sometime later in the day, and then of course in the evening they might have an official dinner. So of course that all of those events would take hours to actually to complete. But if you're doing a reporter package, you might have 3 minutes, and that would be a long reporter package. So you certainly would have to take a little bit from him getting off the plane, perhaps a little bit of him arriving at the dignitary's home or their official residence, or then you would have to take a little bit of the press conference, and then of course towards the end of the timeline you would have to take maybe feature them at an official state dinner. Well, that would be a montage, and you would have certainly condensed time and space. So particularly from a time standpoint, you would have literally condensed what took hours to actually do in real time. You could condense that down to perhaps 20, 25 seconds. And so that's a very useful way of utilizing montage, and that's something. Again, this is a term montage that we'll be talking an awful lot about for the rest of the semester. Number 5 is dialectical montage, and this is another term that we'll be talking about. So, but the definition that we're utilizing or using here is Russian filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein's theory of montage is an idea that arises from the collision of independent thoughts, wherein each sequential element is perceived not next to the other, but on top of the other. Sergei Eisenstein was a early Russian filmmaker, and the Russians, and like many of the Europeans, were very early on, of the advent of film. They realized how powerful a medium film could be, and the advent of film just happened to coincide pretty much with a lot of political turmoil going on in Europe. You had the beginnings of World War I in 1913. By that time, film wasn't quite 15 years, hadn't been around for not too much longer than 15 years. And also 2 years later, in 1917, you had the beginning of the Russian Revolution, where you had the Bolsheviks, the communists, basically attempting to overthrow the Tsar. I think it was Tsar Nicholas, and indeed they did overthrow Tsar Nicholas. And Eisenstein was one of the early filmmakers there in Russia that utilized film in order to move the masses, in order to motivate the proletariat, motivate the people to rise up against the Tsar and the oligarchies associated with Tsarist Russia. What's important to remember about dialectical montage is that it is one shot building on the next shot, building on the next shot. We are also going to be drawing a distinction in subsequent discussions, lectures. We're going to be drawing a distinction between Sergei Eisenstein's theory of dialectical montage and another early innovator from America, and that would be D.W. Griffin. And we'll talk a lot about D.W. Griffin. D.W. Griffin has the dubious distinction of being one of the most racist individuals in America during that time, and he was the filmmaker who created Birth of the Nation, and we'll be talking about that as well. Just an aside in terms of D.W. Griffin, we're going to be juxtaposing Sergei Eisenstein's dialectical montage theories versus D.W. Griffin's theories of continuity of cut. And that's a very important kind of dialectic in itself, the tension between those two very different approaches to making cinematic continuity. Number 6 is the term juxtaposition. And again, this is a term that you're going to hear an awful lot about. And it's the extra emphasis given to a comparison when the contrasting objects are close together. The close placement of two ideas to imply a link that may not exist. Two or more contrasting sounds, images, ideas, etc., together for stylistic or symbolic effect. And again, for our purposes, the most relevant part of that definition is two or more contrasting sounds, images, colors, ideas, etc., together for stylistic or symbolic effect. Juxtaposition is an important term because it again you're creating a new idea from bringing together existing ideas, and we see this in art. And I'm going to be referencing some examples of some of the great artists, world-renowned artists, where you can always see how they juxtapose the color wheel, the juxtapose the primary juxtapositions of primary and secondary colors. We see this in dance, and I'm going to kind of reference some dance exhibits. You could think about, choreography, particularly when it comes to classical dance, ballet, modern dance, where you have the choreography involves one type of movement or one type of the dance component kind of signifying the harmony of the music that's being played, and the other part of the dance movement signifying the melody of the particular music that was featured. We see juxtapositions in sometimes you'll have when we have an ongoing series, example The Wire from a few years ago, or back in the day with the Sopranos, or whatever your favorite Empire with Cokie and I forget Lucius, her husband. There's always a juxtaposition of character arcs over the course of the series from one episode to the next, and that's a good example of a juxtaposition in media. So there, and a juxtaposition is a term that you'll find people using in a lot of different contexts. Sometimes from a standpoint of politics, it certainly as we're talking about in art, juxtaposition is again a very important term. The last of the terms on the lexicon list is ambient sound. And ambient sound is the background. It means the background sounds which are present in a scene or location. Common ambient sounds include wind, water, birds, crowds, office noises, traffic, etc. Ambient sound is a very important concept. Obviously, when you capture a particular scene, a particular environment on video or film, obviously you're capturing the audio as well. There's always going to be some type of ambient sound associated with it. Ambient sound can actually become, when it's creatively used, ambient sound can become almost like another character in a narrative, in a script, in a story. And I'm going to reference you to a sequence from an episode of The Wire, where it's such an amazing utilization of ambient sound, of natural sound. And that's another term for ambient sound, is natural sound. So again, stay safe, and I'll be talking to you soon.